Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am so glad to be here, and I hope you are too. I hope you've had time over the summer to review some of our replays and catch up on what we've already done. And we left you with a nice little cliffhanger. We were going over the 4 agreements. And now tonight, we're going to finish the last 2 without making assumptions and always doing your best. I am Joanna White, the spiritual holistic teacher, and I love everything mystical. Also, I love also growing and self-knowledge. So that's what this 4 agreements does for me, is self-knowledge. And I'm looking forward to that topic tonight. And I pass it on to you, my dear friend, Carol.
Thank you, Joanna. Again, welcome back. My name is Carol Pilkington, and I work with high achievers that are going through anxiety, depression, and have a general sense of sorrow. And I'm looking forward to tonight to covering those other 2 agreements. And I'm handing it off to Claudia.
Hello, everyone. I'm Claudia Rocafort, and we are the Mystic Mavens, and it's such a pleasure to be back with you again. I am a spiritual counselor and guide and facilitator, and I help clients clear whatever's in the way of them achieving their dreams and finding their heart's desire and true purpose. And I do that through this mean and all the mystical things, as well as through business. So take it away, Kathy. I can't wait to get this conversation going again.
I know, such a juicy one. So great to be back with you, ladies, and everyone listening. Hello, hello. I'm Kathy Basel. I am a transformational life coach and energy healer. I work with women kind of at that stage of life. I call it ready to step into your next soulful chapter. So helping you align with what it is you truly desire in your life, and then release the subconscious and inherited blocks that keep you from truly being your best. That's why I love, love, love this book. Thank you so much for teeing this conversation up, Joanna. I love the 4 agreements. It's by Don Miguel Ruiz. If you're not familiar with the book, he's shares Toltec wisdom. The Toltecs were an ancient society, kind of predated the Aztecs even, and they were very scientific and educational at the same time. And it's interesting because Don Miguel came from a line of mystics, if you will, and his family kind of expected that he'd be carrying on, but he decided to become a doctor. And what he recognized when he started going into the field is that we are not our bodies, and the problem wasn't with the physical aspect of our lives. It was really he calls it the psychology, but he came up with this beautiful, beautiful framework. It's so simple, the 4 agreements, and it is so incredibly powerful. So I'm going to do a quick summary of the 2 that we got talking about, and feel free to hop back to that conversation. It was rich as well. So I'll do a quick summary on the first 2 agreements, and then we'll split up the last 2 and take half conversation for each of these last 2, because each one is just so incredibly powerful. So the very first one of the 4 agreements is to be impeccable with your word. So with our word, like the most powerful words that we use in the world are the ones that we use for ourselves. Oftentimes we're better at committing to other people, but truly for us to stand into our power, it's really imperative that we learn to be impeccable with a word, starting with the words that we use with ourselves. Don Miguel in the book talks about how much of our lives is through domestication, and those words that we're giving are actually things that we've kind of inherited. And he says up to 95% of the things that we say, 95% of the things we believe can be false. So would you be willing to kind of question everything? And we'll be touching on that. So that's being impeccable with your words, it's doing what you say you're going to do, but it's also taking responsibility for how you're speaking to yourself, because our words are powerful and they create your reality. The second one is to don't take anything personally, and how much of this, we live, for other people's affection or validation. What if everybody is living in their own I like the reality tunnel that Carol talks about. We've got our own reality tunnel. And oftentimes we're all operating out of our own point of view. So what if those reactions that other people are giving to us is really saying more about themselves than it is about us? So you can imagine if you took this, concentrated on it for a few days of not taking anything personally, the things that other people do, it frees us to recognize that we stand in our own truth. And it's an invitation for us to know what it is that we know about who we truly are. So become the strongest version of yourself. So I just love those two, super powerful. Interesting. Don Miguel says himself that even if you just took the very first agreement of being impeccable with your word, that one agreement is enough to change your life. So it's interesting because first three agreements he talks about of being in our own imagination. So you can see how using the words and taking things personally, those are things that we're thinking about other people. And the third agreement is as well. So the third agreement is about don't make assumptions. So this again is something that's happening in our mind. Our mind can have many different channels going on at the same time. And oftentimes we're making assumptions because we are afraid to ask what can be courageous questions to get clarity on what somebody else means. It's easier for us just to kind of slap a label on something or make an assumption about what somebody meant by what they said, or we make assumptions that I was good at this one when my poor husband. I just assumed that if he loved me, he would know what I wanted and, you know, what my preferences were and that kind of a thing. And we do that a lot in relationships with other people. So the invitation here is to not make assumptions, because it's when we do, we're kind of writing what we think, what we believe to be true. It's kind of funny because at the beginning of relationships, oftentimes we're making assumptions, kind of painting the picture. It's like the honeymoon phase. And so we're painting the picture of how wonderful this new potential mate is. And so everything is blue skies and whatever, rainbows. So we're making assumptions in that way until something happens and our hopes are dashed. And then we begin to make those other stories. And what if all these stories are all assumptions? What if rather than trying to change somebody, just recognize who they are and accept them for the way they are? So without making assumption about who they are, who they aren't, just trust. It allows us to live in the present of what's coming up and question, you know, what's right for me? Where are they coming from? You can see how this third, it's almost like these agreements build one upon the other, recognizing what the word is, that everybody has their own version of that, and then not taking that stuff personally when somebody flails their beliefs at you or their accusations at you. What if that is their storyline that's playing out for them? It really doesn't say anything about you. And then not to make assumptions about what those other people are saying or doing or coming from. So that's my summary. I'd love to hear if you guys have other things you'd like to chime in about how we assume things and really make, as they say, an ass out of you and me, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I also think it's about the stories that we tell ourselves about what happened. You know, there's the isness of what happened, and then there's a story that we make up around it. And we often don't pay attention to the distinction of that. And so also it can affect the memories that we have about something that happened, you know, in the past. And we bring it into the present and we drag these beliefs, which is where our belief systems come from, right? Our assumptions come from our belief systems, and they get applied to every situation in our life and all the people in our lives. We bring that history in based on the assumptions that we've made, and the faulty memories that we have.
They say 80% of our memories aren't even really true anyways. And I love as you're describing it, it just feels so heavy, like we're dragging all this stuff along. It's like, no wonder we get to a point where we're not energized and excited about our life. It's because we're living almost, we've got half of our truth, half of our, like one foot in the past, all these old narratives, all these old grudges and blames and shames and frustrations. It's let it go, let it go. I love that.
I love what you just said about letting go, because for me, this one is particularly tied to the first one, to the first agreement, because to me, it's about how willing are you to be honest with yourself and with the world? And how willing are you to reveal the truth of who you are, the good, the bad, the pretty, and the ugly? And you mentioned relationships, Kathy. So, a lot of times one of the biological things about relationships is that in that honeymoon period, right, or dopamine or serotonin or oxytocin, all those things are just making us want to look only at what is aligned, at what we have in common, at what we do like about the other person. And therefore, our perceptions get somewhat pinkish overtone of reality, right? We're looking at it through the rose-colored glasses, but then we begin to see more of the reality. And then the disappointment or the misunderstandings or all of these things come in and we make a big mess of it, right? All of that could be avoided if we could be really impeccable with our word. If we could just look and say, okay, this is what I mean. This is who I am. Am I willing to reveal myself? Am I willing to trust other human beings to accept me for who I am? And by not making those assumptions, when someone says something that maybe triggers something in me, or that something that I'm not sure I fully understand, or that I'm going to take personally, can I stop and feel that and notice it? And just that immediate emotional reaction, can I learn to use that as a big red sign that says, stop and ask, what did you mean by that? Before I take it personally, before I go into expectation or disappointment or anger. I mean, we could avoid a lot of problems in the world if we could do this. And this is why it's huge. It's transformative. It's life-changing. Because there's so many different layers in which we can apply these 4 agreements and how they affect every possible relationship, starting with a relationship with ourselves. Again, it's an invitation to me of, can I love myself more? Am I willing to reveal more of who I am, the truth of who I am, and see the truth of others without necessarily judging them, just observing, accepting.
Yeah. And just thinking of all the different stories that, we're buying into, we are given them, but we don't have to buy them anymore. So, it might have served us up until now, or maybe it didn't, but now we get the opportunity to make that choice. But certain little things, like, what does it mean to be beautiful? Or what does it mean to be successful? Or it matter that we matter, like the most important desires of our life, we're kind of bastardizing with these other things of like, it's got to look like this or that, and that's not true. So I just love how you said it's like our ability to love ourselves enough to take off that mask that we put on because we thought that that's what others, what we needed from what society needed from us, how we were expected to show up in order to be part of the clan. We don't want to lose that connection. So how many masks have we accumulated in all different areas of our life? The relationships, the loves, the money, all these aspects. If we can take those masks down and love yourself just the way you are. It's fun to, if you ever catch an interview with Don Miguel, he's just so animated and so in love with life. He's like, the only thing we got to do is love our life. Like that's what God is, like the everything. It's the space between the reactive thoughts. It's like, yes, yes, yes. That is the invitation. That's the freedom. Catch yourself in between the spots and grab it. Miss Joanna.
Yeah, I as I sit here and just listen to not making assumptions, the part of me that is still growing is asking myself when I am triggered, why does that trigger me? Because a lot of times we can immediately go to blame when we're triggered, but when something affects us, it's us. And learning that mastery is what I feel like the 4 agreements does for me, is giving me an overlook of, okay, what did I say that caused this? Or what did I say? Am I being impeccable with my word? But also, when something does come my way that may trigger me, may, have that effect on me, what am I assuming about this? Why am I getting triggered by this? So a lot of times, just taking that self-analyzation of who I am in this situation, a lot of times is what, if I could ask myself that, then I don't have to react. Because a lot of times we can react quicker than we could even ask ourselves a question. So I try to step back. I think that's the, with making assumptions, that's the greatest tool that I found for myself, is to sit back and ask, okay, why did that just trigger you? When you notice that feeling come, just that second to ask myself that question is now allowing me to review and figure out, okay, maybe you're making an assumption about what they said. Maybe you should ask them. And a lot of times it's the courage, because you don't want to really hear the answer. I always say that don't ask questions you're not ready for the answers for. So we don't ask those questions. We rather make assumptions because we don't really want to hear the answers that'll come. So a lot of times it's really just to go within. Am I ready for the answer for this?
Mhm.
Is this the truth? It's a lot of self-evaluation when it comes to that assumptions thing. And it's pulling back, really, that second to ask yourself a self-reflecting question, I feel like has been the best tool that I've had for checking myself in that time, I would say.
You just said something that was really powerful for me when you said, is this the truth? And that's so powerful because truth is different for everybody. When we stop to really look at it, there's, yes, as Carol calls it, the isness, the facts, the real, right? But so much of that is perception. Is it my truth? My truth may not be your truth. And so much of that truth can be my beliefs creating that truth. So we do get to question it. We get to question ours, everybody else's, and not take any of it for granted. But really, I like to think of it as a constant wonder of, who are you? What do you believe? How do I get to know you better? By asking those powerful questions. And what do you perceive as truth versus what I perceive as truth? Not make the other person wrong, not make yourself wrong either, but question constantly. I think it's powerful.
Yeah. Also, what was coming up for me was in this day of technology, we write emails to one another and we read things, and someone might send something that is quite direct or matter of fact, but the receiver takes it as something very abrupt and curt, and we make assumptions of what the person who wrote the email was meaning, the intent behind it, the tone behind it, because we're not face to face with one another. We can't see the tone, we can't see the facial expressions, whether they're smiling, whether they're having a dry comical moment. We can't tell any of those things, right? And we take things the wrong way, and then we shoot off a response that the person who wrote the original email says, whoa, what the hell? Where's this coming from? So and it gets snowballed, right? And what something so simple as to, this is how I read the email, but I don't want to make any assumptions about what you actually were meaning or referring to, or the tone in which you were saying it. Or if you don't hear from someone for a while, we make an assumption sometimes that the person is ghosting us, or they're being disrespectful and not responding. And we don't know what's going on in anybody else's life, right? We have no clue. But yet we leap to the worst possible thought, instead of saying, hey, you know what? I hope this person's okay. I'm going to check in with them, see if they got what I, sent. Maybe I'll even call them. Wouldn't that be a novelty? If we have the phone number, of course. But so those are the other kinds of assumptions that we make a lot of times, and how things can snowball out of control.
I feel like most marriages are done because of assumptions. Just making all kind of assumptions in relationships. It's a really, just like you said, 80% of our subconscious is like made up. So how do we not assume something when, it's just so, I just find it, ooh, that's all.
The intention, I love all the concepts that you guys teed up, of just the invitation to take that moment to assess, like first at me, like, whoa, what was that why did it strike like that? And then what else is possible, instead of, going to the negative, because our brains, just knowing that our brain has a negativity bias, just what else could this be? Oh, it might be, the phone might have died because they're out, whatever. Somewhere, that's why I'm not hearing from this person. But I think to recognize that we have within us that a defensive desire to be right or be important to somebody else, and just kind of check that at the door. Give yourself the grace of that moment to reflect and say, what else is possible? And hold that intention of like, I really want to be in the isness of this conversation, and what I really want is true communication, like conscious communication. I'm going to ask that question, a clarifying question. It's going to take courage to ask that in the face of this emotion that's welling up for me, and maybe that for them, maybe or maybe not, and create that two-way conversation, which allows, like Claudia, you were kind of saying, if somebody else has a different point of view, you can have grace with that too, with the desire to have a loving connection.
One of the things that I find so powerful, and I keep going back to some of this because it is so powerful. So when I was working with executives and C-suite, I have a whole exercise on perception, on how we can use the exact same word and different people perceive it differently. So one of these kind of alarming statistics is that 79% of corporate mistakes happen because of miscommunication. And literally 69% of marriages end up in divorce. It's because lack of a communication. So that says to us, okay, wait a second, we're speaking the same language. So where is this not connecting? How are we not seeing each other, understanding each other, and being able to connect at a place where we actually understand each other? And a lot of that is, we're not necessarily always being impeccable with the word. So mean what we say what we mean, stop and think, how is this word usage going to affect me and others? That's why for me, the number one is so important, right? And can this lead to a misunderstanding? Can I clarify? Can I find ways to show up as authentically as possible, so that I kind of create as little misunderstanding as possible? And then I get to check my ego at the door too, because, a lot of times we want to be seen, we want to be understood, and we don't want to lose face and feel that we are wrong, right? So sometimes we defend things and we make assumptions because we believe that we know what we're talking about and don't want to turn around and say, what do you mean? Like, I'm not sure I'm following what you mean, right? So there's a lesson in humility in this. There's also a lesson in understanding, like we talked about, that conditioning, those beliefs that we've carried most of our lives, that we get to ask, are these still valid? Are these still true? Are they relevant anymore? Can I let this go now? Can I choose a different belief that supports me more? I wanted so much to be seen as a kid. I felt like I wanted to prove to the world that I could do it all. And now it's like, well, I like to try to do it all, but now it's from a different space, right? And I can also say, I don't know about that. I'd love for you to tell me.
And what a beautiful conversation that is, to have invite somebody in to that middle ground.
Mhm. Show me your world. Tell me what you know. Share your perception. That to me leads to also a much greater, deeper connection where we actually get to see each other and get to know each other. Like I say, the good, the bad, the pretty, the ugly.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, like you said, once we bring down that mask of needing to prove, like Brene Brown has the quote about, we spend half of our lives like creating that need, and then the truth about who we think we need to be, and then we spend the rest of our time trying to prove that that's right. So take the mask off, and then it opens up this place for true connection and joy and love. Like if you loved yourself enough, invite others to have that connection and love. I think it's a beautiful thing. So I think let's dive into the last one. So it is always do your best. And it's interesting because the first three are all in the imagination, the stories that we're concocting within. And the last one is actually allows us to wrap up all three of those and to put it into action. So in always doing our best is to recognize that life is kind of like a river. So we're never going to be the same person. We're never going to be always up or always down. So your best is kind of a subjective on a day-to-day basis. What does doing your best look like? And again, you can kind of circle back and do, what if you were doing your best with being impeccable with your word, doing your best at, not making assumption. If you circled back and wrapped all these, but put them into action, creating rituals so that you're always showing up in alignment with that. That's the path to mastery, is always doing your best. It's kind of like not using external motivation as the way to do it. It's really an internal calibration of this desire for this freedom that comes when you're free of these masks that we've been talking about, and begin to set that intention to connect heart to heart and to live in joy and love and these things. It's a beautiful space. So.
Absolutely. With doing your best, it's, as you were just saying, what is my best today? And when I travel, I notice when I come back, I don't have the energy to do as much as I would normally do on a day. And I had to give myself grace and say, this is the best you can do today. Tomorrow's a new day. And being able to own that is like Claudia said, I'm used to doing everything I need to do, so when you have to sit back and say, this is it today. If it's getting up and taking a shower and going to lay back down, that's all I had enough energy for today. That was my best today. So I think that's huge with just understanding what your best is. It's not always that high energy, high flow, and it's not always that low energy, just having grace with whatever it is today.
Maybe your best is taking care of your body and getting an extra nap in after that travel.
Yeah, it's really
Great example.
Mhm.
Yeah. And also, I've always talked about completing cycles of action. That's part of completing any given cycle, is knowing that you've done your best for now. And also, when we're having conversations with people or doing anything, our moods fluctuate throughout any given moment and of a day. And in any given moment, we're doing the best we can. And to be able to be accepting of that. And also, sometimes we just don't know what we don't know. So in our communications with others and the things that we're trying to accomplish, we might not always have all the information at our fingertips that we could, but we don't know that. And so with whatever we've received and with whatever we have at our fingertips at that moment, we are doing the best we can with the information that we have.
Mhm.
And it's so important because when we punish ourselves looking back at, I should have done this, could have done that better. No, you really couldn't. Just accept that you did the best you could at that particular moment with what you had, with the information that you had, the knowledge that you had at that time. It's really that simple.
And that's really powerful, Carol, when we apply it to others as well. Meaning, I spent a lot of time blaming certain things in my life on choices my parents made for me, for example, and feeling that I didn't have those choices, right? And I wish they would have done it differently. But I've come to accept that ultimately they were doing the best they knew how, with the knowledge they had at the time, with the limitations and the freedoms and the education and the perceptions they had. So when we apply this to others as well, can we give ourselves and others that grace, that non-judgment for a moment? Can we forgive? Can we let go? Can we say, maybe they were doing the best they could with the knowledge they had at that time? Because hindsight's always 2020, right? And don't we wish we all could see the future? We'd have that crystal ball and we could channel constantly, but we're in a constant evolution and we're growing and we're learning new things, and we learn by trial and error. And that's the truth. We get to fall down 50,000 times before we get to learn to walk. And if we can apply that to ourselves as adults, as adolescents, as parents, as wives, as partners, as teachers, and say, wow, oh, okay, I just learned something new today that I can apply tomorrow or that I can apply later. But it's a constant evolution. And that, to me, that's the point of living, right? When we're done, if we stop learning, then what's the point? So it's ideally that constant point of evolution that will lead us to every day doing the best we can that day, and be graceful with ourselves and with others and say, okay, it was not as good as yesterday, but it was the best I could do today. And it might be better than tomorrow, or tomorrow might be better than today, without judgment, with just the ability to look within to do the best we can that day.
I love the sense of just like expansion that comes when you think about putting all that blame, the judgment, the, shame, frustration, like there's a
Take a load
lot.
off.
Oh, that's heavy, and truly when we're living with our foot half in that blame of the past, we're only living half in the present. So the invitation here is for us to become fully present at this moment now, at this day now. My best looks like this, and with no shame, no expectation above what we can do. It's not, that old conversation of when we were growing up, the need for perfection. It's like, that's so 2020, I always say, just like let that stuff go and live into this day now. But gosh, it truly is breathing into the words of these 4 agreements. There's so much transformation that's possible. It's just one of those books I read a couple times a year, and it's always something different for me.
I just want to touch on that perfection.
I'm not the only one.
That's always a good one.
Because they have learning that doing your best is not perfection. And that differentiation for me was huge, like I just feel like that's something that a lot of people may go into, and they feel like doing their best is a form of, I got to be perfect at something. Doing your best is just the action of doing. The fact that I'm going to try this, whatever it may be for you, even if you attempt something and you may not actually succeed, you did your best. It's not the perfection of it. And I just feel like that's something that really needs to resound, because sometimes people feel like doing their best is being perfect, and it's far not the truth. So I just really wanted to just touch on that a little bit.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Monica. That's so powerful. Go ahead, Carol. Sorry.
no, that's okay. Yeah, and that means that there are no real mistakes, because if we're here to learn, grow, and evolve, there's no mistake. We're
Right.
just growing. We're learning every single step of the way. What works, what doesn't work, what's going to move us forward. And we just go from there. Even if we feel like we're not moving forward, a lot of times we are. We're just at the bottom rung of that next step.
The bottom rung, I like that.
Yeah.
There's so many levels to wrong. That's the bottom rung. I like
But there's always a bottom of every step, right? You have the step, and when you're lifting, you either catch your foot at the tip of that step, or you lift it all the way up and you land on the step. There's that space in between, right?
I love the play on words. It's good.
I like that. Oh, boy. Yeah.
But it's really powerful how that search for perfection can be so limiting, right? And can really throw us off on the path. And it's not about that. And it's not about expecting that from ourselves or anybody else, for that matter. Just as we make mistakes, everybody around us does too. And maybe they didn't find the right word to express what they wanted to say, and they used something that triggered you or that hurt you, or that. How do we continuously find ways to set our intention to do our best, look to improve? That to me is all that's required. It's, am I willing to learn from the mistakes? Am I willing to find another way to possibly do it better? Am I willing to look at where I went cuckoo or wrong? And if there's no judgment, there's no wrong. It's just, can I find a better way? Can I find a way that supports me more, supports those around me more? It's not about making myself wrong either, or making others wrong either, but maybe we could say this more lovingly, more kindly, more authentically, more efficiently, so that we can find ways to continuously set our intentions to do our best. And look at, are those around us doing the same? And if not, can we invite them to? Without judgment, without attack. It would really help me if you could find a way to clarify what you mean, so that we can, without going into assumptions about each other, find better ways to communicate. And it's a beautiful invitation
That's what I
also.
was gonna say, it almost becomes like being willing to give somebody that benefit of the doubt, that grace, that invitation to like, no, tell me what this is really about. That ability to willingness to see from their point of view, their perspective, where they're coming from, to understand how they got there, who they are. Like that to me is kind of the greatest invitation that we can be, and it allows other people to meet us in that space. And when we look at all the divisiveness that's been cultivated these last couple of years, I can't think of a better thing than we doing our best and to try to be impeccable with our word and to invite people into that conversation with us.
I think it's also such a huge gift that we can give someone too. The greatest gift is to say, I see you, I hear you, I understand you, even if I don't agree with you.
Right.
To me, that is one of the most beautiful gifts I think we could ever give each other.
And I just with you're right, when you can grow with someone, because that's what it is, when somebody's willing to go to the hurt and maybe address it, or go through something and address, okay, I'm not going to have an assumption, I'm going to ask the question. That's a growing relationship. It really is, because you can have those that will make the assumption and will just keep it there. Like kind of Carol said, they'll have the email or the tone and they won't even question it. And those that say, listen, I found a little discrepancy in how you were talking to me, or just being able to say that is allowing both of you to grow. Because now I feel like that person, yeah, it may feel like they were offended, but they're allowing me to see where my faults or how I can hurt a person. So it allows me to grow and say, okay, Joanna, maybe next time when you're writing an email, watch the tone a little bit, or so when you have a person that's willing to go through and say, I had an assumption, or someone that's willing to confront the conflict, is really allowing both people to grow. It's a beautiful thing, because that's what's happening. You're allowing both of you to grow. And I think that's a better way to look at it than they're going to be offended by me or something like that. I think that's because that's what's happening. That's what's happening.
Mhm.
I think part of us becoming ourselves and giving ourselves the capability to be our best comes about through ritualizing some of this, or just clarifying. I love the intentions that we've shared of like creating a safe space, like a non-judgment space, so that people feel safe coming with their mask down to do this. So yeah. Carol, how do you create this for yourself?
Well, what I do is I remember who the person is, and even if I don't know them, I have learned the hard way not to make an assumption, to really honor the fact that they are operating with the best intentions. And I have no history or reason to believe that they're not. So why would I assume otherwise, right? And so that's where I come from. And it didn't always come from that place. It learned things the hard way, believe me. But I truly have learned those lessons. And then with the people that I do know, I just have to I remember who they actually are. It's, if something is getting twisted in my brain, then I'm the twisted one.
That's what I love about you.
Not them. And it's my responsibility to clarify it.
Right.
So that's how I deal with it all.
Absolutely.
It's liberated. It's almost like assume the best of somebody else. If they said something, it's like, oh, they must be in a rush that it came across so brusque or whatever. It's like use that assumption to your benefit in a way. Like how you spun that.
Yeah.
Speechless, ladies. This is so powerful, though, because, in the measure in which we start putting all of them together, starting with, to me, I still feel that the first one is that self look, that deep analysis, that creating consciousness. What am I saying? How am I saying it? Why am I saying it? Where's it coming from? And then being able to say, okay, let me not take anything personally, because why are they saying what they're saying? How are they saying it? Can I ask those clarifying questions? And then I can be impeccable by not assuming anything, but asking and clarifying every time. And therefore, if I am doing all of these things, I am setting that intention and that integrity of trying my best. And I love the way they connect. For me, this little book is something that I've been actually giving to executives and clients for like the last 18 years of my life. I've actually met Don Miguel Ruiz and his son, and we will probably talk about some of the other books, possibly the Fifth Agreement and possibly the Mastery of Love, which is another one of Don Miguel Ruiz's books, which is life-changing, and the Mastery of Self. So stay tuned, because we might end up bringing some of these things and sharing them with you. They're just fabulous books, and highly we recommend you take a look at them.
Absolutely. I think I've read all. The Book of Knowledge, Love, like the 3-pack. Yeah, they were all, I read all. I actually used to do a class on these, where I used to run a class on them. And there's so much change that happens for people when they start following these agreements and making them with themselves. And it's not for anybody else but yourself. That's it. Do I want to be impeccable with my word? Yes. Do you want to take and make assumptions or take things personally? Nobody wants that. So, and then putting all of this in action, like you said, just with doing your best. Who says I don't want to do my best? So making these agreements with yourself, and just taking note every day. Am I being impeccable with my word? Did I take anything personally? Just going through this self-check every day, you can see change in your life. I promise with just that.
Yeah, your life will change. These are very, very powerful, life-changing things that develop consciousness, develop awareness, change energies, change relationships, change the way that you communicate with yourself and with others. So we highly recommend them. Take a look. If you haven't read the 4 Agreements before, this is one that you want to go pick up for yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what have we got going on for September 17th, Claudia?
Oh my goodness. All right. So we're going to be talking about the tarot. I love this because it kind of brings back my Spanish roots. And so I love using the tarot. And it's one of those divination tools that can be incredibly powerful in terms of its history and what it can guide us and how we can use it in our everyday lives. And there are many aspects of the tarot, so we may have more than one about the tarot, but this one, we're going to be talking about how to uncover and use the tarot to guide us through archetypes. And so September 17th, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, we look forward to having a conversation. And if you join us live, we might be able to actually pull a card for you and give you a little guidance live.
That's
So
a
I
great
hope that
idea.
you will join us and you'll take advantage of the fact that you'll have your 4 Mystic Mavens there to guide you through any questions you may have or anything that you may be going through where you would like a little guidance from us. So we look forward to seeing you then.
How cool is that?
Yeah.
Excited.
Fun.
I love you ladies. You're awesome. Such a beautiful conversation.
Yes,
Yes,
it
I
has
thank
been.
you.
Life and love and light.